Hello everyone. In this submodule, we will understand what are the various challenges and the sediment strategies for the coastal zone management that are there. Firstly, we will take an overview of what are the coastal communities, the situation of the coastal communities in the Indian coastal region. So, India's coasts are home to about 170 million of the country's 1.4 billion people, and they are on the front lines of a shifting climate experiencing sea level rise, erosion, and natural disasters such as tropical storms and cyclones. The latest evidence can be considered as May 2020, where the strongest storm recorded in decades in the Bay of Bengal, the cyclone Amphan hit, which forced several million people to evacuate. India lost 235 square kilometers of land to coastal erosion between 1990 and 2016, which placed people's livelihood and their habitats in jeopardy, with flight to safer places occurring voluntarily or as a last resort through government intervention. Now, according to the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, about 3.6 million Indians were displaced annually between 2008 and 2018, mostly as a result from flooding due to monsoonal rains that are heaviest in the South Asia in when we talk about in absolute terms. While most of the existing policies in India address the displacement from various rapid onset disasters such as monsoon and cyclones, displacement due to slow onset disasters such as the coastal erosion, they have yet to find a place at the policy level. So while local policies in India have responded to the such coastal erosion related challenges for the coastal communities, the response has not been properly addressed by many current and future impacts in the national policy. Recently, developed nations have addressed issues which are related to their coastal resources, but developing nations have lagged behind on the coastal zone management. The vulnerability of the coastal communities have not been mentioned in the India's National Action Plan for Climate Change as well. The absence of coastal management suggests that the concerned organizations have yet to understand the magnitude of the potential effects of the sediment related coastal erosion or the beach erosion that is there on the coastal communities. So, in order to come up with any plan or fully understand the extent of the challenges that are there, we need to identify what are the specific stakeholders. So when we talk about the direct involvement in the coastal zone, they can be the navy or the coast guard or any other national defense related operations that are there. Various ports have been developed. We have 12 major ports, and under the Sagarmala and the Gati Shakti project, new ports and various waterways have also been developed, like the Vindhyam port is coming up. So for that, various port and harbor development authorities have need to be also catered to. Shipping and navigation form a major part of that. Then recreational boating for tourism related activities that are there. Various resorts can be built up and all. And then marine and coastal research. As we know, India has a vast coastline which is subjected to the climate change and the human activities as well. We require extensive data on understanding the marine and coastal research. So various institutes like the National Institute of Ocean Technology, the INCOIS, all of this can be brought in to understand the wider challenges that are there. And then in order to monitor or to remedy for the remedy of the various shoreline erosion, we need various private sector firms as well. We would undertake dredging or again having sediment from the seabed. So various private sector firms or the public sector firms, the dredging corporation of India, all of this are also directly involved in this. Now, when we consider not having direct impacts, so there are agriculture related activities which do not in the coastal regions as well. Forest related activities are there. So when there are upstream regions, due to agricultural practices or due to deforestation, there might be excessive sediment runoff, especially in the monsoon season. This would lead to excessive sediment deposition into the coastal regions. So how do we check on that? It's not that just related to the coastal communities, but also on what are the activities that are going upstream. Then there are various education related. So how can we educate or how can we skill the coastal communities that are there, or the various departments that may check on the coastal related disasters. Water pollution control, public health control, housing infrastructure development, water supply or water transport navigation, all of this would also be included. Now, continuing our discussion on the coastal communities that are there, we know that the coastal ecosystem is very vulnerable because of its dynamic nature due to the frequent erosion and accretion. When we talk about India, there have been many cases. So, in the state of Orissa, a number of villages, towns, and cities are situated along the coastline of the Mahanadi Delta. with an average population density around, ranging from 250 to 1000 persons per square kilometer. It is one of the most popular coastlines, populous coastlines in India. In the lesser educated societies in this delta, especially in the tribal communities, the literacy rate has been quite low, and as a result, they are also unaware of the various risks that they have been exposed to, and they are mostly being related to work in the tourism sector only. Not in case of any natural disaster or in case of shoreline erosion, the tourism activities are also affected, thus affecting their livelihood. The spatial distribution of the erosion along with the household and the population density, we can see this in the figure, and we can see that very few areas are having significant risk towards erosion. Thus we need to identify which areas are at major risk from erosion or from erosion related challenges. In this, the marine special planning can be brought in to identify regions with high population density, high tourism rates, high risk associated with the sediment related buildup or the natural phenomena that is there, and then finally coming up with some decision making policies and interventions. Now, these various human induced or the natural processes lead to various shoreline changes as well. The physical interface of the land and water, we call it as a shoreline. So, it is one of the most rapidly changing landforms of the earth, which causes shoreline changes occurring over both long and short periods of time and involve the various hydrodynamic, geomorphic, tectonic, and climatic forces. The broad trends in the shoreline behavior in the recent and past are helpful to a certain extent in understanding the coastal response to future sea level rise. Now, from the coastal vulnerability point of view, coasts are subjected to accretion and are considered as less vulnerable areas as they move toward the ocean and result in the addition of land areas, whereas coastal erosion is considered more vulnerable because of the resultant loss of the coastal land. You can see this in the figure as well. In the Gujarat coast, various vulnerability studies have been done in order to identify and to map the regions with the vulnerability, to rank the regions with the vulnerability. Now, whenever a particular infrastructure, in order to tackle the various disasters in the coastal areas, infrastructure may be built up, breakwaters may be developed, or soft and hard infrastructure can be developed, but they also have their own disadvantages. So, when the construction of the breakwater is done, this leads to formation of a bay in the estuarine mouth, which may affect the sediment dynamics in the particular region. So now the shoreline analysis or the shoreline change analysis has revealed that the entire stretch, which extends from Navsari to Valsad in Gujarat, is under the threat of rapid erosion. It is estimated that from around 1985 to 2020, around 60 square kilometer of the coast have been eroded in the coast. The sediment supply from the rivers have also diminished, leading to the relative sea level rise and erosion along the coast. Studies in India and abroad on river deltas find that the construction of dams and canal links affects the sediment supply. This was the case in the Purna river delta, which is one of the major rivers of Gujarat that rises in the Sahyadri hills that are there. The fisheries are also affected due to the various infrastructure development upstream. So, for example, the damming of the river Bharatpuzha upstream and the construction of the breakwater have resulted in the silting of the river mouth and erosion of the shoreline. They have impacted fishery with the loss of biodiversity due to the sedimentation of the various fishery habitat and the destruction of mangroves in the estuary. This has also led people, particularly those involved in the fish trade in the community, to get affected. Their livelihood is affected. So when we talk about the various challenges that are there, the first is the water quality degradation. So due to the high sediment loads, the turbidity increases, which reduces the light penetration, which is essential for the photosynthesis and health of the aquatic plants and the phytoplankton. The sediment also carry various pollutants, including heavy metals, pesticides, industrial chemicals, which can contaminate the aquaculture ponds, negatively affecting shrimp health and growth. This excessive sediment deposition can smother the benthic habitats, reducing the availability of the suitable substrate for shrimp and other aquaculture species to thrive. They can also alter the natural breeding grounds and nursery habitats, affecting the reproductive success of the shrimp and other species. Apart from that, there is the pathogens as well. These sediments can harbor pathogens and parasites affecting or that which would increase the incidence of diseases in the various shrimp farms that are there. Accumulation of the organic matter in sediments can lead to hypoxic conditions, fostering the growth of harmful bacteria and increasing disease outbreaks. Then there are hydrodynamic changes, which are basically fluctuations in the erosion and the accretion, coastal hydrodynamics, and the salinity levels. And then there are the various economic impacts, which would lead to an increased cost, because managing sediment related issues can lead to increased operational costs for various shrimp farmers, including expenses for water filtration, pond maintenance, and disease management. Adverse sediment conditions can also lead to reduced growth rates, higher mortality, and lower production, which would impact the economic viability of the aquaculture operations. Mangrove are another crucial aspect. So, the mangroves play a critical role in protecting the coastal communities from climate change and reviving wetlands. Their aerial roots hold sediments and prevent erosion, while the roots, trunk, and canopy minimize the force of the oncoming water and storm surge, which result in barrier from floods. Now, there has been a case where 25 villages in the Pathar Pratima block of the South 24 Pargana district in West Bengal has been identified for the plantation of over 30,000 mangrove trees. The initiative aimed at preventing the saline river water from crossing the danger line and killing the crops in the surrounding fields. Along with plantation, various mangrove nurseries have been set up in cooperation with various self-help groups of the pre-identified villages. These nurseries supplement the coastal communities with additional resources of income without the need of middlemen or mediators, shielding them from all forms of abuse and exploitation as well. It's not just about the ecosystem restoration that we're talking about, but whole of the socio-economic elevation of the life of the coastal community and of the improvement in the coastal economy and the coastal GDP. So all of these are really linked to each other. So what is required currently is the capacity building of the various coastal communities. The coastal communities, again, they are prone to frequent disaster and livelihood losses. Their proximity to the waters make them vulnerable and becomes more crucial to strengthen their capacity and self-reliance. So what we can do is forming various task force groups that will act as first responders during the times of crisis in collaboration with the various gram panchayats, social activists, local mobilizers, self-help groups, and trainers. We can have this task force within the coastal communities. So the plan could be like to create some task force members who can lead disaster response efforts as and when required. Simultaneously, there could be development and strengthening of the current self-help groups, local youth clubs, and community clubs in the capacity building initiative. This can lead to strengthening of the climate resilience of the vulnerable communities with nature-based solutions, because the communities would have better understanding of the local situation and how at the local scale the changes are happening due to the human intervention or due to the climate change related activities onto the livelihood. For again coming up with any plan or taking up coastal communities and their local knowledge, we need to monitor what are the changes that have been occurring over the course of time. In this, the remote sensing can be used. Now, significant inundation is increasingly common in many delta regions, subject to relatively high flood exposure. Now, global climate change can significantly increase the coastal communities' exposure to the various coastal floods. So, we have the satellite remote sensing, which can be used as a valuable tool for detecting and monitoring the flood phenomena, which would allow for the rapid differentiation between the inundated and the non-inundated regions. Coastal flood risk, it can be monitored. Then there are various earth observations technologies which play a crucial role in the disaster phases, especially in the mitigation and the preparedness phases, by guaranteeing the development of extended investigations and searching for precursor signals of potential disaster and forecasting future evolution of natural phenomena, the sediment dynamics, and then identifying what are the various critical conditions before the onset of any disaster. In order to mitigate the many adverse effects due to the various disasters, we can have various coastal project protection structures as well. So they may be using harsh structures which are constructed to prevent erosion of coastal landscapes and the infrastructure and mitigate the risk to the pollution and population and economic activities. The coastal structures are sometimes referred to as hard structures and are built using materials such as concrete, large armor stores, steel, or timber that are relatively permanent and are spatially fixed within a otherwise dynamic coastal zones. So, for example, these may be sea dikes, sea walls, detached breakwaters, groins, jetties, some examples of the various coastal infrastructure that is there. Then apart from that, there are soft shoreline stabilization processes where the main objective is to achieve a balance between the need for protection against erosion while maintaining and enhancing the shoreline functions. Soft stabilization methods are highly dependent on the local environments and processes governing the sediment pathways in each system. As such, the additional planning for these methods may be required because again differences in the coastal geomorphology, physical processes in governing the sediment transport, and then the local ordinances are also varying across the various state boundaries. So all of this needs to be taken care of. Now, whenever we talk about disasters, we need to understand, we need to develop some early warning systems. Now, in order to understand this, we will explore a complex question. Why do coastal hazards cause more damage and suffering in some places than others? Physical aspects that lead to one place being more vulnerable than another, such as topography, geographic location, all of these are very much crucial when we talk about the hazards and their effects on the region. Now, in order to have in-depth analysis of the various early warning development of early warning system, we need to ask more questions. We have to understand more about not only the ecosystem but dwell more into the diversity on the socio-economic parameters as well. So, for example, we need to also consider when we talk about the coastal communities, like what kind of population is living there, how many people and how the people are making their living, what is the economic status, is the population largely made up of more vulnerable people such as poor, elderly, or the sick, what kind of housing is there in the particular community, is the infrastructure designed to withstand a particular hazard, are there industries and businesses in the community that could be at risk or may pollute the community if affected by coastal hazard. So all of these questions we should be asking basically to understand how vulnerable is the particular community and its inhabitant to a particular coastal hazard. So when, for example, a storm does strike a populated area, the amount of harm caused will depend on the complex interaction between the various local, physical, and social factors. The information on the biodiversity is very much crucial and likely to be affected by the anthropogenic activity and the impact of the global warming on the sea. Again, there are various cyclones and tsunamis, as we have already talked about how they also affect the coastal communities that are there. This lead to again changing shoreline configuration of the coast, cause excessive floodings, which will affect the livelihoods of the coastal communities, migration of the local people to other areas. Cyclones over the region are very much frequent and cause damage to infrastructure and life. For example, the super cyclone which occurred during the October of 1999 in the Bay of Bengal induced a mesoscale phytoplankton bloom as evidence from the satellite data and persisted for over a month. The state-of-the-art tsunami warning has been designed around GIS and implemented after this devastating tsunami in December 2004. So again, various tsunamis can also teach us how can early warning systems be developed, what are the various components that can be incorporated in them. For this, what we require is capacity building in terms of the acoustic systems as well. How can we skill the workforce that is there when we talk about the cloud computing, Internet of Things? How can we bring in technological interventions to monitor the changes that are there? This would lead to data collection. Then data collection would also have many aspects. What kind of data is to be collected? How are we mapping the data and then sharing the data between the various departments that are there, which may then come up with efficient national, local, and the regional policy initiatives for when we talk about the sediment related strategies in the coastal zone management. So with this, I'll end the discussion here. Thank you.